So, reminder that the directions do matter. You need to know what they mean. You can't just do the same thing on every problem. Just remember that you're trying to write everything as a multiplication problem. So if you see this, just remember it means we need an answer that is multiplying something. Okay? So common factor, or GCF, you might remember this is where we started. What number goes into all three numbers? Okay, that would be 5. We said if the first term is negative, we'll take out a negative as well. And then find out how many variables do they have in common. So 7, 6, 5, they all at least have 5 in common. Okay. So we found the GCF, and now we'll have 3 terms on the inside because our question has 3 terms, that if we distributed, so this times this will equal that, and this times something will equal the 45v to the 6th. All right, just the reverse of distributive property. We took the same thing out from each. So if we do a check, it'll multiply back together by distributing. Okay. So negative 5v to the 5th times what gives you negative 40v to the 7th. So we need an 8 to make negative 40 and 2 more v's to make 7, because 5 and 2 is 7. Right. And then negative 5 times what is 45 positive? And positive 9, and we need 1 more v to make 6. 5 and 1 will make 6. Yes? Yes? Well, I took out a negative here. So if you didn't take out a negative, you'd have negative 8 and negative 9. It's not wrong if you do it that way. It's just more common to see. We want this first term to always be positive. So if the first term is negative, we take that out as part of the GCF. Wouldn't be wrong. It's just a different way of writing it. Good questions. And lastly, we'd have plus 2 to make negative 10. We don't need any more v's because it's already v to the 5th. So that's just the beginning. And you can always check by distributing it back together. Make sure each of them multiply to equal those 3 terms. And there's always a check built in. Now, the grouping is really where the box started, because we've done the box before. That's why we jumped right into it before. But what we didn't have is 3 terms. So that's what was new today. But if you already have 4 terms, you can just go straight into and put those 4 terms in the box starting in the middle and do the same thing you were just doing. So part of what you need to remember is when do you use which steps. You can't just use the same exact thing on every single problem. You got to read the directions and know. If you're given 4 terms, then you don't need that, okay? You don't need to do the x, because the whole idea is the x will give you 4 terms that you can put in here. Okay, and then just do the GCFs here. So we get k squared and k with a 7. Remember, these two have to multiply to 7k to the 3rd. We'll have 6 and negative 4. Your answer is just 7k minus 4 and k squared plus 6 in either order. We know we wrote them as factors. It says factor by grouping. We have factors because we have multiplication at the end. And you could do a check on those and make sure it's absolutely correct. It'll come out to what the question was. And then starting on number 5 is where we picked up today. We just use the box. That's what we did on the notes. Right? But we can't do it like the last problem because there's 3 terms and we have 4 more. We have 4 boxes total. So that's the dilemma with when you have three terms. Well, we have two boxes, but three terms. That's where the x comes into play. Okay. The first and last multiply to 2n to the second, and then the middle is -3. And if you figure out these two numbers, what adds to this bottom multiplies to the top, that's what goes in these two spots. So what multiplies to 2 and adds a -3? Negative 2n and -n, or -1n. So -2 times -1 is +2. -2 and -1 adds up to -3. And there you go. In either order, doesn't matter which one is either location, those are interchangeable. Lastly, do the GCF for each row and column. N, 1, N, 2. Now, I like to put the numbers there first and then figure out the positive negatives, because I know those numbers are right because 2 times 1 is going to be 2, but you can see that these two need to multiply to -2, so we'll make that a negative. These two need to multiply to -1, so that's a negative. And the two negatives multiply to a positive, so we're okay there. So our final answer is n-2, n-1. Now, if you want to not use the box, if you like the other way better, you can do that. What you do is you take the same 2 that came from the x, so you still have to do the x, and instead of the -3, you just write -2 minus 1. So you substitute out the -3, replace it with -2 and -1, which equals -3. And the first and last stay the same. And then you might remember you find the GCF of the first two, and then the GCF of the second two. So if we take out an n from the first two, we're left with n-2. And we know that this needs to match. So it's going to be the same thing here. And I just need to figure out what's that missing term so that it equals -1n plus 2 when I distribute. So you get -1. And from there, so I'll review n-1, that's where this comes from. And the two that are same are the second factor. Just write it once. They have to match. If they don't match, something's wrong. So you can use either method, the box, okay, or this is the straight line factoring. Both of them require using the x, though, to get either those two or these two. Right? And